Hello and welcome to the IRN-CRU, an American football podcast made in Scotland. I'm your host Dan Connor, and on this podcast we'll be previewing the NFC East ahead of the 2024 NFL season. To ensure you don't miss out on any of our pre-season and in-season content, make sure you follow, like and subscribe to all our YouTube and all social media channels, and wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere you can get a podcast you will find us. As always, throughout the season and through the pre-season, the crew would love to hear your thoughts ahead of your team's season ahead. So feel free to drop us a message, comment on our social media, and we'll answer your questions as we can. Tonight I have a stellar cast of NFC East fans joining me. I have some familiar faces and a very special guest joining me. And a bit of a spoiler and a completely unbiased point of view, I'm going to introduce our panel in the order I think the NFC East will finish this season. So, first up, this guy is a returning contributor and one of the finest podcasts around, covering his team all over the world with UK Cowboys fans and the world's team. Bringing his expert knowledge of the pre-season from the start is Paul Stewart. Welcome back, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Glad to be back. Glad to be back with the IRN-CRU. And yeah, just here to talk about football and have a good discussion where we all see how the NFC's going.
And it's probably no surprise to anybody that I introduced you first, to be fair.
There's the bias.
Had to be done. See, next one, there's no wonder who's coming next. That's the thing. I've set the suspense up here. Second, we have our special guest with an exciting season ahead for his team. A second place is definitely duo. Joining from the beautiful country of Wales, it's Commanders fan Aled. How are you doing tonight?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem. Good to good to get contributors on. I don't think we've ever had a Commanders fan on before, so.
Oh no, well, there's a few of us out there.
Yeah, I did find that. Quite a big Commanders fan base in the UK, by the looks of it.
Yeah, followed the franchise since '92. So
wow.
Yeah.
Long suffering then.
Yeah, long suffering. Yeah.
Well, who's next? Next up, we have the crew's own giant giving his insight to the thoughts of the off-season in New Jersey. It's Gav. How are you?
I'm very well, Dan. Very well. And I guess it's worthwhile saying that if we're firing the shots early tonight, that for any of the Cowboys and Commanders fans, we can convert this pod into a cassette for you, which is the last time you're in a title game.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I will give you credit due for that one, mate.
And last but not least, we have another of our regular crew members still trying to cope with the loss of a very popular centre. He's here to give his thoughts on all things Eagles related. It's Kev. How you doing?
I'm very good, mate. It's been a long time, and I'm just really excited for the new season to start. I can't wait to start talking football again.
Excellent. So, guys, to get us kicked off, basically what we're going to do is we're going to have a wee quick recap of last season. All right. So basically all we're going to do is just give me a wee 30 seconds. How did your season finish up? What's your thoughts on how your team finished last season? I'm going to give us a quick rundown on how the league finished, and kind of get your thoughts. So we'll start reverse order. So as much as I kind of gave you the bum up there, Aled, at the start, we're going to reverse back to last season. So you guys finished 4-13 last season. Give me 30-second thoughts on last season from the Commanders' point of view.
It was just so disappointing. You know, you go into every season with so much sort of thinking that they'll do well, and you know, to finish like that, just like a damn squib. But I think a lot. You know, there was a big transition. Obviously, we had a new owner, and it was a bit of a nothing season, really. I just wanted to put that to bed and move on because, onwards and upwards, really. It was bit of a disappointment all round.
Well, talking of disappointment, Gav, the Giants finished 6-11. What's your quick thoughts on last season?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a miss. I think I had the Giants around about the 9-10 win mark in last year's preview pod, so it's definitely short of where I'd expected, and probably definitely a regression from Daniel Jones, perhaps a regression to the mean, some people might say. But I guess, like a lot of Giants coaches before, particularly thinking of Coughlin, Dayball's got a team that would keep on playing. So I think they went 500 in the last 6 games, which shows there's pride there. Probably knocked us a few places down in the draft, which is frustrating. But it's good to see that the team kept playing to the end.
Perfect. So as we said, Kev, the Eagles finished 11-6 last season. He's lost out in the wild card to Tampa Bay, losing 32-9. After all the the last couple of seasons. How's your thoughts on how last season went?
Obviously, really disappointing. I think that I'd been saying the season before that we were often just doing enough, and we seem to be carrying on in that vein. But rather than improving and starting to become more comfortable in games, we went the other way. And I think it was largely down to problems in the coaching staff, problems off the field rather than on it. We don't have bad players, and we didn't do as well as we should with the talent that we've got. So I'm hoping that the changes we've made this year is going to put that right.
Yeah, just sorry to labour it, but you did say, Kev, you've been saying for the last couple of seasons, you've just done enough in games to win them, and then last season, that just enough wasn't enough.
Yeah, so, you can't keep doing that, can you? Sooner or later, you're asking for trouble. So that's what happened in the end.
And then, Paul, as you know, the Cowboys, kind of the last few games of the season, we stole the divisional title, finishing 12-5, then lost in that wildcard game to the Packers 48-32. The scoreline was close on it. It was an absolute doing, a completely complete surprise to everybody. 30-second thoughts on how the Cowboys season went last season?
So in terms of the regular season, we went off to a really good start. We were 40-0. Sorry, Gav. We beat New York Giants 40-0. Then beat the New York Jets 30-10. Then we lost to likes of Arizona. Then we started having games like against the bigger teams like San Francisco, Buffalo, and likes of the Miami, who were on a hot streak that year. Like, it seemed to be the big games. We just didn't rise up to the occasion, but we still managed to scrape into the playoffs. But with the momentum going into the playoffs, we thought, well, Green Bay are not the same Green Bay anymore without Aaron Rodgers. We took it for granted, essentially. And yeah, we deviated from our game plan, going away from man coverage into zone coverage. And yeah, basically we got our ass kicked.
We did. Not even a little bit either, to be fair. But that's a good summary of last season, guys. So let's see how you think this season is going to go, guys. So basically, Gav, I'm going to come to you first. I know we've been speaking off crew there a lot, and I know you've been dying to speak about a certain part of your pre-season. So take it away, Gav. So first, tell us about what things have been happening off season over at Giants HQ, kind of personnel changes, coaches, players, any changes that have been on in the pre-season. Tell us all about it.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think there's quite a few big ones. I've got to say more on the departure side to talk about. But I think we'll get the elephant in the room out of the way first. Saquon Barkley, best of luck in your future endeavours. And I don't mean that with any sarcasm at all. He was a cracking player when he was healthy. I think a couple of weeks back in the pod, there was a suggestion that I think the Giants fans are going to be quite bitter about this bitter with Saquon, particularly going to the Eagles. I think we've got to be realistic about this. Saquon is obviously had the franchise tag last year, but he was essentially looking for his second contract. We know that he's had problems with injuries, and he is, when healthy, a fantastic talent. So this is a guy who wants to get paid. Having said that, we've all gone through the fact that running back is not the most valued position in the league anymore. It's, I think even kickers are starting to catch up with some of them. And certainly we saw, with the Chiefs Super Bowl winners, they're not spending very much at the position. So I completely understand he wants to get paid. The Giants have got multiple needs, as you'd expect from a 6-11 team. So I wish him well. I think the Eagles will get a great player, but we need to upgrade in other positions. So that's the big departure for us. I think we've had a few notable other ones. So we'd Ben Bredesen from the offensive guard position, Paris Campbell also off to the Eagles at receiver. But I think probably the other one that's quite notable for me is Xavier McKinney at safety. He was a key part of the defense for us. He's gone. And it probably is worthwhile actually just mention Tyrod Taylor. I know he's the backup QB, but there's a guy who obviously worked with Daboll previously. He did have to come in when Jones went out injured and did help us to win a couple of games. So again, maybe not the most important position in the league until your starter goes down. So I think that's going to be a miss for us in terms of the departures. On the other side, however, there were a few big additions. I mean, obviously, just to paint me run through some of the lesser names for Seoul. So we would Jermaine Elimunor, who's on the offensive line. Drew Lock is now the new backup QB. Jalen Mills at cornerback. Tyler Newbin safety. Andrew Phillips. Jordan Phillips at D tackle. And Aaron Stinney on the offensive guard position. But I think probably the big storylines. So one was a pre-draft trade. We acquired Brian Burns from the Panthers, which I think is going to be a big addition for us. We have a new defensive coordinator coming in, Shane Bowen from the Tennessee Titans, replacing Wink Martindale, who was let go. And obviously, as we know, that's probably one of the few positions or position groups for the Giants where actually there's a few talents, so that could actually really make a position of strength for the team this year. But the other one I think we need to talk about is Malik Neighbors. So he's the number 6 overall pick in the draft, and obviously this is a draft which was loaded at a number of positions, both receiver and quarterback. I think depending who you speak to, Neighbors is the best receiver in the draft. Now, don't get me wrong, Marvin Harrison Jr. and also Rome Odunze could equally be in that bubble, but I think that is a position where the Giants have really struggled. You know, we joked last year about it really was a bunch of no names that we had at the position. You know, we've really whiffed, and like Kenny Golladay previously as well. So having a youngster come in who has the potential to be another Odell Beckham Jr. You know, I think that's really what we need for a franchise that, you know, has, you know, it's been over a decade now since the last Super Bowl, I think, and only one playoff win since then. It's the kind of addition that fans need to be re-energized. So I think that's quite an exciting one. I guess the only other one.
Just sorry to jump in. Just something you mentioned there about wide receivers. So I've got a list of the wide receivers that Daniel Jones has thrown to in his career. Okay, you ready for this? Kenny Golladay, Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, Ricky James, Kadarius Toney, and Sterling Shepard. That's who Daniel Jones has had to throw at in his whole Giants career. So let's go a quick flip back to Neighbours. And what excites you about him? He is going to be a number 1 receiver. Like you said, there's a fight between 3 of them to be the best receiver coming out of the draft. I think Neighbours is definitely the most explosive out of the 3 of them. So what do you think he's going to bring to your team this season?
Yeah, I think the big thing is elite speed. So, I mean, as we know, you know, in the NFL, all positions speak kills. So having someone that's a real threat that they can stretch the field, but actually has the pieces to support that. So we do have Jalen Hyatt, who's the 3rd round pick at the position last year. And there was probably a couple of flashes, but I guess that's a guy who you're not really expecting to be a true number 1. So expecting him to carry the load last year, particularly as a rookie, it's kind of unrealistic. You know, Darius Slayton's also contributed at times, but as you mentioned, it's been a bit of a hodgepodge there. So having someone who both has the speed, but actually the complete skill set to threaten the opposition, give their defenses something to really scheme around. I think that's going to open things up, because the one thing I will say, not so much in favour of Daniel Jones, but actually I think this comes back to Brian Daboll, is he has the ability to get the absolute best out of what he has to work with. And I think certainly season before last, you know, that run to get to the playoffs, actually win a playoff game in the road in Minnesota, you know, he was getting good things out of Daniel Jones, and I think, as we'll probably come on to discuss, this is a key year for Daniel Jones. He's not in the fight, not going into the last year of his contract, but the Giants do have a handy exit route after this season where he'd be relatively cheap to cut. So it's definitely a prove-it year for him.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Jones obviously is coming off of that injury. I mean, you never know how somebody's going to react to an ACL injury, especially at a quarterback position where he has to be so mobile. But I think, like you said, that there seemed to be not last season before that run with Daniel Jones where he looked like the quarterback. He looked as if he was going to do something, and then last season just was back to being the average quarterback. So the season before, everybody thought, "Wow, who's he?" And that last season, like, that's Daniel Jones. Some points they made is obviously he's not had a lot of help on the line in terms of blocking the last couple of years. He has been getting absolutely smashed to pieces from defensive tackles and stuff like that coming through because he's not had the protection. Something else he's picked up this season who might help Daniel Jones a wee bit, and you mentioned Barkley going is Devin Singletary. He's not going to be a replacement for Saquon Barkley, we all know that, but what are you expecting him to bring to the team?
So I think that's a really important point because as I kind of touched on with other teams like the Chiefs, it's not necessarily about having great running backs. It's about having good ones and being smart with the money. Singletary, he's not Saquon Barkley, but I don't think we need him to be either. It's about just having the pieces around Jones that can help, basically help him to be successful, and just having a semblance of a running game. Obviously, that is going to open up the pass, particularly the play action, which I know was really successful in 22. So I think it's going to help bring a bit of balance and really let Jones hopefully rediscover his feet.
Yeah. So on to the other side of the ball then, so you mentioned picking up Brian Burns. That was a great trade for the Giants. He impressed me a lot last season. I think it was one, like, and I've seen some of the videos about how that came about, just random chats. It was at the Senior Bowl, I think it was. They were having chats, and suddenly he was suddenly on his way to New York. Someone who I had a lot of hopes for, like 2 seasons ago, I think he's drafted them, was Kayvon Thibodeau. So having him and Brian Burns together now, what's your thoughts on the way your defense is shaped up ahead of the season?
So I think, as I mentioned, the defensive line, if we all talk about all the time that, quarterback's the most important position in football. Then I think from the defensive perspective, it's about getting after the quarterback and putting pressure on them. And that now the fact that you've got Thibodeau, you've got Brian Burns, it becomes a real area of strength for the Giants. Obviously, we're still going to need the secondary to keep up their end of the bargain. But if you're cutting down the amount of time that the passer has to get the ball away, and obviously it is a strong division at the position with Jalen Hurts, with Dak, and now Jaden Daniels. That's going to be critical for us. There's one name that I've not mentioned there, but we'll save him for a little bit later on. But Thibodeau specifically, I think I'd predicted him to break out last year, and I think 11.5 sacks. It's maybe not an all-time season, but it's certainly trending in the right direction.
But did you not also tip Jalen Hyatt to have a big season last season as well? You didn't think you were getting away with that one, did you?
So that's where Gav was wrong.
You were not getting away with that one. Yeah, I mean, a couple of other players he's picked up in the draft. He's Tyler Nubin at safety. Obviously mentioned losing McKinney. So he's picked up him, number 47. He picked up Phillips, the cornerback from Kentucky. Something you didn't mention about losing was Darren Waller, obviously retired. He's picked up Theo Johnson at 107th pick. Tight end, so interesting to see how he schemes into your offense. Obviously, Daniel Jones is used to having Barkley as that safety blanket. Singletary going to give him that. Normally, we have a tight end, so interesting to see how a rookie tight end goes. And as we all know, Brian from the crew thinks tight ends don't actually start performing until the third season, so interesting to see how that goes. And a couple of late picks, he's had a running back, Tyron Tracy from Purdue, and Darius Masso for the linebacker. So he's shaping up, building the pieces together for the Giants this season. I think he's just still building. So ahead of the season, what kind of fixtures are you looking forward to? Obviously, the caveat for this part of the crew is we don't talk about divisional games. Everybody looks forward to divisional games anyway. So looking at your schedule, what other games are you looking forward to?
Well, I'm going to say, first of all, I think I'm quite thankful that I don't believe, certainly the Giants don't, and I don't think the rest of the division plays the Chiefs. So I'm going to kind of put that to one side. It's not about taking a shot at the Kings here. I think the key game for the Giants, maybe a wee bit out left field here, is week 5 at the Seahawks. So Giants travel to Seattle. I think the reason I'm thinking there is, honestly, after 6-11 season, I don't think we really know what we've got in the Giants. And if I'm being honest, I think kind of managing expectations this year. But a month into the season, you kind of know what you've got. And if you look at the run of games that we've got after that, certainly for the Giants, it's going to be challenging. But these are games that if you want to be successful, you've got the Seahawks, then you've got the Bengals, you've got the Eagles, and then you've got the Steelers. Teams, I think it's fair to say, are all good, but not great teams. And if the Giants want to have a successful season, those are the teams they're going to have to beat. So I think, that mid-season run is going to be key for us.
Yeah, he's also open to the Vikings, which was probably looking like a bit of a ominous fixture to open the season, but the way things have happened over the last couple of days, you might actually have a decent start to the season against the Vikings. So, we're interested to see how that plays out. Okay, Gav, give me 2 players from the Giants this year. Give me someone who you think is going to crush it and who you think is going to be a bit of a breakout, or someone who's going to step up that's maybe not done it before.
Right. So I think in terms of the breakout, we'll go to that first. I've talked about him already, but Malik Neighbours, I think, really does have the potential to be a breakout star from day one. The Giants have struggled with receivers in recent years, but I think the one where they, when they did actually go receiver in the first round, no, I'm not talking about Kadarius Toney, but Beckham turned out to be a real bright spot. Even when the team as a whole wasn't great, I think the Giants are about 6-10. Beckham's rookie year, he was still racking up records and giving us something to shout about. And I think Neighbours can be the same for us. As we mentioned, Jones needs the help. He is someone who, both for Giants fans, but also for himself, he needs to crush it this year. I think the jury's still out if he will, but I think Neighbours is the guy to give him the best shot possible.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Gav. It's interesting to see what happens all over New Jersey this season after last season.
Yeah.
All right.
So I think...
Sorry, you go, Gav. Sorry.
So I said Daniel Jones needs to crush it.
Oh.
But I think the man who will crush it, I tried to stay away from a wee bit. We talked about the defensive line. Dexter Lawrence, PFF, best interior defender in football. I think he was actually the number 3 player overall in the league from Pro Football Focus. I think second only on defense to Myles Garrett. So he's absolutely up there. So if I talked about the line being a position of strength. We've got Brian Burns on one side. We've got Kayvon Thibodeau on the other, and then you get Dexter in the middle. We've actually got a new coordinator at Shane Bowen, who blitzes a lot less than Wink Martindale did. So I think this is where we're talking about coming back to the Giants of old. When we do think about these Super Bowl successes, you think about the likes of Strahan, you think about Justin Tuck, you think about Osei Umenyiora. So having 3 major threats on that front line is going to be critical for us. And I think Dexter is as safe a bet as you can get to crush it this year.
Perfect. Sorry for interrupting you, Gav. I misunderstood what you said about Daniel Jones. I thought he was your crush it player. I was getting a bit concerned. I was like, if that's what he's going with, that's what he's going with.
That was bold. It would be bold.
Well, that's putting yourself politely, to be fair. Right, Paul, there's been a lot of changes over at the start of the season. There's a lot of stuff that hasn't changed that maybe should have changed so far. So give us a rundown of how the off-season is going for our Cowboys then.
So obviously the first one, and I'm sure our good friend for representing the Wales Commanders can verify this as well, is our former defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, is now the head coach of the Commanders. We've also lost several players due to free agency from Cowboys to the Commanders, like Tyler Biadasz, Dorn Armstrong, let me see who else, Noah Mbonige, and there was one more, Dante Fowler. So there was quite a few players, even though I wouldn't necessarily all of them were like first tier in terms of the rotation. Like probably the only exception was Tyler Biadasz, who I think is a big loss for the Cowboys and a really good gain for the Commanders. Obviously, as well, we've brought in some Mike Zimmer into the fold, which I'm a big fan of. I've always been a big fan of Zimmer's less is more approach, less complicated, more effective, like that terminology. He really keeps the defense more simplified, doesn't want to move players from maybe if you're from a free technique going into a one technique or going back to edge, like your Tyron Crawfords or your like what Chancey Golston used to do under Dan Quinn. He was either switching between edge and defensive tackle. So it's they're fixing players that are not at like their best positions, and the best example of that would be likes of Marquise Bell right now. The question about him, would he be like a safety or a linebacker? We've seen him being utilised in that preseason game there against the Rams. He's been utilised as a safety, and we already saw the impact. Just even though it's just a preseason game, but it felt more natural for him to play in that position rather than being an undersized linebacker. Obviously, CD Lamb's been holding out for his new contract deal, and I totally do not blame him. I'm not angry with him, but at the same time, it gives other guys like Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert, all the other wide receivers an opportunity to actually try and get up to that same level. Because one thing we did notice with the Cowboys last year was when CD Lamb was either on the sideline or whatever or not, there was quite a bit of a disconnect between wide receivers and Dak Prescott. So that was I'd say that's a good bit of bonding between the rest of the roster to actually kind of help elevate. So therefore, when CD Lamb comes back, there's going to be a lot more valuable options available. In terms of Tony Pollard, he's now off to the Tennessee Titans. Sad to see him go, but at the same time, when kind of looking over the stats, even though he is an 1,000-yard rusher 2 years in the trot, but his average has went down last year, like taking up 100 more snaps from 2022 and still and only gaining like a 4-yard average. So it's not really a good stat when you've got all those snaps, but your average is going lower. So you would expect the average to either be the same or be that little bit higher, especially if you're being deemed as your starting running back and not running through a running back by committee situation like Kansas City has done in the past, etc., which proved to be very successful. Obviously, we brought back in Rico Dowdle. He's now in the fold. We've actually brought back in Ezekiel Elliott back into the fold. So I'm quite excited for Rico Dowdle to see if he stays fit, see what he can do. Obviously, when it comes to the draft, we've brought in like Tyler Guyton, the offensive tackle from Oklahoma. Seemed to be really good and comfortable, even though he was primarily a right tackle in college. He stated he prefers playing on the left and get to work with like Duke Manyweather, the offensive line guru, who's actually been working directly in Dallas, working with offensive linemen all across the NFL. He's been doing absolute wonders for him and many others across other teams.
Stop out for a second, Paul. Watching Tyler Guyton, he's took no prisoners against the Rams in the scrimmages this week, has he?
Yeah, that one particular play. The 19-yard rush for Trey Lance to run up 19 yards up the field. It basically, I don't know who the defensive end was, but he was basically moved from one end of the line to the other side of the line. And I was just like, that is just like, that's exactly what you want, especially in the run game from your offensive lineman, is to actually put your presence in there. I think, let me correct myself. It was originally a passing play, but obviously the pocket got a wee bit too close, and then it was like just escape the pocket, and there was the gap, and Guyton recognized it and just closed them in. So it was really good awareness from Guyton. But the biggest one for me is obviously I am a big Cooper Beebe fan who we drafted in the third round from Kansas City State. I was absolutely going bananas when we got him. And when I heard that he was going to be like drafted as a potential for the center role, I was like, I wasn't too sure about it at first, like because he's never really played center ever at all, like in a game situation. But he has practiced it, but it's basically covering all options. But I think it's also there as a fail-safe in case Zach Martin does decide to retire in the next year, which will be a massive loss. Yeah. So I think it's just trying to just cover our backsides in terms of that. I think I've pretty much covered in terms of the off season there.
We picked something that happened quite a while ago, so you might have forgotten about it. We picked up Eric Kendricks, obviously, as well.
Oh yes, how could I forget that? Which so that Eric Kendricks, I think, was a really smart move from Mike Zimmer. Because Eric Kendricks, as some people who do not know, he was under Mike Zimmer's role under Minnesota, played many years under his defensive scheme, so he knows what is expected of him. So for him to give any inspiration and wisdom to Maris Lalafu, the 4th round draft pick from Notre Dame, which seems to be an encyclopedia, kind of giving me a bit of a Sean Lee type of like mindset towards the game. He's not like Sean Lee, but in terms of like processing and being at the right place at the right time. Seems to be like, I think that will come, like, that will be a really good positive for the Cowboys in that regard. And like I said, we've got like I said, Marvin Overshawn, who obviously last year hurt his ACL last year. He's now pretty much essentially he's doing his rookie season now. So I'm really excited to see what he can do. And then you've got like I said, DeLon Brand, Trevon Diggs and stuff like that, etc. in the cornerbacks position. Diggs is coming back from his injury, and we're seeing like Kalen Carson. I believe he was a 5th round draft pick this year. He's been really outstanding in camp, and obviously like veterans as well are really starting to kind of like having the best camp of their lives, like Jordan Lewis, for example.
Yeah. So you mentioned also some of the players for the defense that have moved on to Washington. Somebody else who picked up in the draft was Marshawn Nealand. How's he looking so far? He's
looking really good. I wouldn't say he's not like your DeMarcus Lawrence as of yet. He's got the size and the strength in that, in terms of hitting his gaps the way he should be doing. Like he doesn't do anything too complicated. Like it doesn't make his job harder for himself. He sticks to the basics. So I quite like that in regards, especially when it comes to the run game. So it'll be very interesting to see how when we go like week 1 against Cleveland, because like obviously there's going to be a more of an expectation from him now that defensive end Sam Williams is now out for the season, which is a big loss, I think, because I've got great contacts with Sam, and I've spoke to Sam on multiple occasions. Really nice guy, and he's obviously gutted obviously what's happened in that. It's just an absolute shame, but it's always kind of it goes back to what Bill Belichick says. It's like next man up, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Williams last season was the next man up. He started to put himself in a position, he was making good plays, and you thought he's going to have a breakout season next season. So just one of those things, unfortunately, in American football, you see where people, just as they get to that, where they need to be, they pick up one of these injuries.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Sam, even though Sam, whenever he was on the field, even though like from a statistic point of view, he was maybe not getting the sacks or tackles for losses, for example, like the fact that he was actually putting the pressures on the quarterback, that's one of the statistics you need to really keep on tabs, is the pressures. Is he actually beating his man on the edge? So, and he was doing that. So, but because obviously now with Dorrance Armstrong gone, you would have thought there would have been more reps for Sam Williams. It's just not the case from now, and I just need to wish him all the best in his recovery.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously you mentioned Trevon Diggs coming back. It's going to be interesting to see how it works at safety, because you're going to assume now that Bland will be in one side now after his season last season, and Trevon Diggs will be on the other side. So it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. Okay, in terms of the fixtures then, Paul, obviously, as I said earlier, apart from the divisional games, what games are you looking forward to seeing the Cowboys playing this season?
I am very interested in the Houston Texans game, believe it or not. The reason why is because the Texans are on a hot streak right now with a really hot quarterback in CJ Stroud. They've just brought on a powerhouse weapon in Stephon Diggs, and they've added multiple weapons across the board in their defense. So it's not going to be an easy game. Like I was at the last, and it's a game I'm going to this year, but I was also at the previous Houston Texans game for the Cowboys, and I'll be perfectly honest, we didn't deserve to win that game. We managed to win that game within the last 2 minutes of the game. It was very stalemate. It was like 17-16 at the 1 minute 54 on the clock or something like that. And Cowboys just did a 2-minute drive and ended up stealing the win. But the Texans have gotten so much better under that 1 year. And I think Cowboys fans need to realize need to take them serious.
Yeah, I mean that also comes as a week. I think it's week 10 that comes as well, that game. So it's going to be a key point of the season where both teams obviously could be vying for positions within the divisions also as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it could be interesting to see how that one goes. All right, excellent. Right, okay. 2 players for us. Who's going to crush it and who's going to have a breakout season for the Cowboys this year, Paul?
So who's going to
crush it? Who's going to be the best player on the team this year? Who's going to stand out for us and who's going to have a breakout season?
All right. Okay. So crush it. I mean, I will say I probably will end up saying Micah Parsons, because he has even though despite him being on the podcast and going to Japan, sumo wrestling with sumo wrestlers in Japan, which I find is just stupid personally, but I can't dwell on it, but when he's on the field, he does amazing things. So, and I think he'll continue to do that. And he has been having a really good training camp so far. He's been having really good one-on-ones going up against like Tyler Guyton, the rookie, and stuff like that. Really like both of them going for tit for tat. But in terms of a breakout, I'm going to go with my guy Cooper Beebe. Like, even though he's not the starter right now, but he will be. Like, I think he will be at some point, if it's going to be guard or center, he will be. Because obviously he's battling Brock Hoffman right now for the center position. He's going to be the starter for the game upcoming against the Raiders in preseason. So it's going to really determine who's going to be center number one for the Cowboys, I think.
Excellent. All right, let's move on then. Aled, Paul stole half your thunder in terms of players that you brought in and coaches you brought in this season.
He probably knows more than me. I'm happy with that. You helped me out, Paul. Thanks for that.
That's no problem.
Apart from those that Paul has just rhymed off that has joined the Commanders this season, give us a rundown of how well your off season's been.
Well, obviously it's been massive. The new owners came in last season, kept it the same, which was a good move in my eyes. And then obviously the off season then hired a new general manager, who in turn obviously hired the head coach. And then with that, you've got the positional coaches, offense, defense, assistants, upon assistants. It's just been cleared house. You know, it's basically like last person in FedEx, turn off the lights. It was that drastic, you know.
Yeah,
so it's been
for a second, Aled, but you needed that though, didn't you? You've needed that for a few years, I think, haven't you?
Oh, definitely. Total reset. It needed it, you know. And it's easy to say, but like you said, Dan, yeah, we needed it. So it was good it happened. And it was good it happened with the current owners, who I feel more in tune to wanting the team to do well. So it's obviously been busy with in the front office, but then obviously, like you said, like Paul mentioned, Paul and Dan, we have stolen a few sort of players and coaches from Dallas. Obviously, Dan Quinn has come in as the head coach, and then obviously he's gone back to Dallas to get Joe Witt. So that's really exciting, because I think like Joe Witt will surprise a few people. I think really happy with his appointment. And obviously we got Cliff Kingsbury. He's the offensive coach. Why I'm excited about his acquisition is because obviously, you know, he has been a head coach, and I know that doesn't always work out, but it's great. He's got that layer to his game as well. He's been there, seen it, done it. But he's obviously, as you all know, worked with players like Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes. So I think it's a good sort of coach to have to nurture a young player.
Yeah.
And then to go on to obviously touch upon Jaden Daniels, obviously second overall off the board, Heisman Trophy winner, dual threat. And, you know, it's hard for me being a romantic. You can imagine me in Wales. I'm quite a romantic, and it very much seems like an RG3 type of scenario, you know, from 2012. Exactly the same, a bit of a mirror, really. But I don't want that. I don't want a one season wonder. I want the progression. And I think the current people in the office now, they're better poker players, they're better chess players than the previous regime. And I think they'll handle it in a better way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited across the board. And you know, to touch upon like another position group, the linebackers.
Yeah.
For you know, like a lot of positions, they're important, but I think a linebacker is very important. You know, like in our football, the centre midfielders, they see everything. You know, they're shouting instructions, and we haven't had that in the last couple of years. I think the last time we had someone of that ilk was London Fletcher, and that was probably nigh on 10 years ago now. So bringing in Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, I think really excited, especially Bobby Wagner, obviously been there, done it, probably coming to the end of his career, but he's, for us, in a transition, he's like a coach on the field as well. So you're going to help with the youngsters, and he can help push them on. So I think it's little things like that Adam Peters has looked at, and obviously Dan Quinn, and not just pick players randomly based on just ability alone. I think based on like the whole picture and trying to help the franchise, you know, lift up a bit. because like we said at the start, they only won 4 last season. And that's not that far off baseline. You know, we won the division 2020 with a 7-9 record, which is ridiculous, isn't it? You know, winning it on a losing record.
That season.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so if we did that bad, I don't know what you guys did. Do you know what I mean? So,
it's kind of funny. A couple of years ago, we were the NFC least. Then all of a sudden, we became the NFC beast. Like all of us did.
But that's what I love about the NFL. You know, it's not like the football over, you know, obviously in England for me, because I follow Swansea City. But like, you know, like Man City, if they needed like a position, they could open up the checkbook and get it. But you can't do that in the NFL, you know. It's all sort of like you said, it goes in circles. So, you know, you've got the dynasty, but it can't sustain. And then it's someone else's turn, you know. And obviously the draft is absolutely amazing, you know, getting those young players in. And
So look at a couple of players you picked up. And Alex, so let's start with Austin Eckler first. What's your thoughts on picking him up?
Yeah, brilliant. You know, obviously totally enamored with Robinson Jr. Excellent player. You know, obviously 2 years ago, just before his debut, gets shot and he comes back and, you know, he has a cracking rookie season, and then he took another step up last season. So this next season, I'm expecting him to step up again. But to have someone, again, you know, been there, done that with the Chargers, he can nurture Robinson. And obviously, they can, you know, and in this league, you need sort of more bodies. You know, you can't just go with one running back. So I'm happy with those 2 players, you know, playing in tandem.
Yep. Someone else you picked up, someone who was kind of a bit later in the draft. Someone I've seen a good bit of last season I thought was really good was Luke McCaffrey. He could be a good piece for us at the back. I was a low pick for us. I mean, I remember watching him last season. What's your thoughts on him?
Yeah. Obviously, again, it's just, well, obviously, you know what dynasty he's come from. But, I think he'll be a good player. And obviously, Adam Peters, the San Francisco connection, has seen, you know, that he wants to use people that he knows, might not know the player, but he knows the name and he knows the family. So I think that he'll be, you know, a good acquisition. Whether that'll be straight away or whether it'll take a bit of time. But yeah, it's exciting to have that play through the door.
Excellent. Okay, so give us 2 players in. Alex, who's going to crush it for the Commanders this season and who's going to be a breakout star?
I think crushing it, obviously, within the organisation, and I know, obviously, there are 32 teams and there are some great players out there, but for me, obviously, wide receiver number 1, Terry McLaurin, absolutely incredible for us, going into his 6th season now. Like last season, last game of the season, he got to 1,000 yards. He finished on, I think, 1,002 yards. So he just passed 1,000 yards. So it was like heart in the mouth. But I think that was, you know, we had like a different quarterback. From the last 6 years, we've had 13 different quarterbacks starting. 13 quarterbacks in 6 years. So he hasn't had a very good time. I think I'm really excited to see what he can do. And I think he'll crush it because of the Jaden Daniels effect. Got a Heisman Trophy, you know, talented player. And I think Daniels is the type of player who can transfer 10% of his talent onto any other player. So if you give him 10% onto someone like Terry McLaurin, you know, you're going up and up and up again, you know. So I think his best season, I have looked it up, but this is not in my head. I think it was 1,191 yards was his best. And I think he'll surpass that. And I think he will get to it before the last game. So I think he will totally crush it because I think he deserves it as well. He deserves just some stability. Like I said, you know, 13 quarterbacks in 6 years is ridiculous. Yeah. And he's coming up, I think he's turning 29 in September. So I think, is it fair to say now or never? But I think if we want to see how Terry McLaurin is as a player, I think there's no better opportunity than having, obviously, Jaden Daniels behind him.
Perfect. Okay, I've kind of done this in a different order for you for some reason. But in terms of your fixtures this season, what games are you looking forward to? What games are going to be key to the Commanders' success this season?
Well, the first game I'm looking at is Tampa Bay. I'm actually flying out to Tampa, so I'm going to be there. Right. And I think, obviously, you only look at the next game obviously you want to keep focused. So why I've picked that, not just because I'm going out there, but obviously Tampa Bay, last couple of years, they playoff team. Not so long ago, they won the Super Bowl. So they're no sort of pushovers. So I think it's going to be a good yardstick to see in the short term. Although I want it to be calm and long-term progression, let's see on the first game, when they've got the pads on, how we do against, a very organised side who, like I said, got to the playoffs last year. So I think that's like sort of my sort of, exciting to see, how Jaden Daniels does and all the other players.
I think we've got to say, Dan, really stepping up this year with the crew. We've got 2 live correspondents, and if I can really try and swing it, I think the Giants in Germany for the Panthers. So I'd try and make Kev. Do you think you can get to Philly at all?
Aye, why not? I'll give it back. In fact, one of you can ask the missus for me, yeah?
Yeah.
Paul, when are you going over to Texas this year? You're on mute, I think.
November 9th, I fly out, so I'll be spending a couple of days with my friends down in Houston. Then we're all traveling up to Dallas and spending the whole week there. And I'll be flying back home just before Thanksgiving. So it's the first Thanksgiving I've not attended in a couple of years. So
on the ball, consult people for the crew in the Americas. We'll get you covered. We'll get you to do some video diaries for us. So we'll just come back. And Alan, I forgot to ask you, who's going to be a breakout player this season?
Breakout, yeah. So for me, it's going to be Sam Cosme. He's going into his fourth season now, right guard. Came in as right tackle, but I don't think he was athletic enough for that position. He even says himself he's quite a hard player. So to have him protecting Jaden Daniels, I think it's going to be imperative. And I think, he has got like a Pro Bowl sort of appearance in his future, or nomination, whatever they do now, because obviously they don't play the games, but you know what I mean. I think, Sam Cosme is going to be, he's going to have a breakout season, yeah.
Excellent.
Just to add on top of that, I totally agree with you, because I think Sam Cosme has actually been one of your standouts for the offensive line in the past couple of years.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's actually been fantastic since he's been moving the transition to guard. Like, I think it was University of Texas he was at, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and he was primarily a right tackle, but he was quite undersized, and so they've moved him back inside.
Yeah.
But since he's made that transition, he's actually been really good.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so really exciting to see what he can do, because obviously I've got a lot of holes in the O-line, but he is obviously one highlight. So I think what's lucky, you've got a dual threat sort of quarterback, so Jaden Daniels, he can run with it if needed, and I think he's a clever enough player not to hold on to it too long. So I think because of those, he can help the shortcomings with the other players in the O-line. Yeah.
You gave a kind of comparison to Jaden Daniels with RG3. I hope you fix the pitch so that you don't get the same
I know.
RG3 had with his knees at FedEx.
I know, it's ridiculous. Yeah, so hopefully it doesn't go down that route, and he's here for years to come. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, Kev, you've been sitting there patiently waiting and listening to everybody else talking about their teams in the division. So, talk us through the off season for Philadelphia this year.
Yeah, after listening to all you guys, I'm starting to think that we might come last this year. You've all talked me into it. This season, first thing was first, we needed to sort the coaching situation out. The gamble last year with Sean Desai and Brian Johnson getting promoted to the coordinator roles didn't work out. We obviously tried to fix that with the defensive coordinator position or role, bringing in Matt Patricia, but that was an even bigger disaster. So the biggest changes I think for us this year is bringing in 2 new coordinators, and both who've got experience as coordinators elsewhere. So we've brought in Vic Fangio as the defensive coordinator and Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator. And I've got to say that I'm really happy with both appointments. I think I said it before talking about the roundup of last season that we've got the talent, and we were underperforming. And I think that obviously bringing in 2 new coordinators who can get the most out of the talent that we've got is going to be huge. And I think that both on offense and defense, we're going to look very different this year, and hopefully the players will be reinvigorated and we'll get a lot more out of them. So Vic Fangio, he's going to bring up a lot more sort of mixture in the defense. It's going to be more versatile, not giving the offense the same looks all the time. And then on offense, I think that Moore, he's going to have a lot more play action. It's something that we really lacked. We've got a lot of weapons, and again, we're just not giving defenses enough looks last year. I think that in promoting 2 guys who were coaches when the previous coordinators left, we were trying to just kind of keep it the same, and sooner or later people are going to find you out. And I think that those 2 changes are going to be huge for us. In terms of playing personnel, big losses are obviously Jason Kelsey retiring, and also Fletcher Cox retiring. So on defence, we've re-signed CJ Gardner-Johnson from Detroit Lions, and at cornerback, we've drafted a couple, I think. So Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, we've drafted in the 1st and 2nd rounds. We've also drafted a defensive end in Jalix Hunt. And then we've brought in the 4th round Will Shipley at running back. But I think we all know that the big piece on offense that we've brought in is going to be Saquon. So getting him for the Giants is going to be massive. I think in terms of Kellen Moore's offense, having him there as a threat alongside Jalen Hurts is going to open up the whole playbook, I think, and give the true elite wide receivers that we've got a lot more opportunities. So, really excited by that. What else have we done? So we've also brought in Uzoma, the tight end from the Jets, and let me see. Other great pieces of business we had this year is extending AJ Brown and Devontae Smith's contracts. So they both signed 3-year extensions. That's pretty much the main business that we've done this off season.
I am going to say, Kev, I'm just so glad that you said Jalix Hunt's name correctly. Because I could have went disastrous for another player he's lost, he's made a lot of news around the NFL over the last since the pre-season, but really in the last week is Hassan Reddick. How big a loss is he in terms of, obviously now we can see his attitude problems, but in terms of off that defensive line, how big a loss is he going to be for you?
I mean, yeah, he's going to be a big loss. Great player. I was sad to see him go, but at the same time, how he was questioned on it, he was, people were asking him like, why did you give him up for so little? And he said at the time, like, this trade doesn't exist in a vacuum, and time will tell. But obviously, how he knew that he wanted paid, he wanted an extension, etc. And yeah, see, to be fair, and how we trust, like he's been great. The wheeling and dealing that he's done over the past few years has been phenomenal. And if he thinks that's the right move, then I'll go with that.
I mean, I'm always quite disappointed that he's never picked up anybody from Georgia in the draft.
Yeah. I suppose that was maybe the biggest surprise for the draft.
To be fair, Dan, we should be told Michigan.
To be fair. Fair point. Okay, in terms of the schedule, then, Kev, what games are you looking forward to? What's going to be key for the Eagles this season?
Well, the game I'm looking forward to most is game 1, probably just because we can't wait for competitive football to come back, but also being in Brazil, playing against Green Bay, who I really enjoyed watching towards the end of last season. They're a really exciting young team, and I think it's going to be a great early indicator of where we're at with the new schemes and everything. So yeah, that one's probably the one I'm looking forward to most when I look through our fixtures.
Yeah, it's a cracker to get started off. It's going to be in Brazil as well, so it'll be a cracking game to get the season kicked off for you.
Yeah.
All right, okay. As standard practice now, give us two players. Who's going to crush it for the Eagles, and who's going to be a breakout star?
Crushing it. I think one thing that I didn't really mention when I was talking about, the changes and how they're going to affect us this season. I think that there's a big question mark over how Jalen Hurts is going to adapt to Kellen Moore's offense. And my pick for crush it is going to just be on the optimistic assumption that Jalen's going to, ball out this year. But my pick for crush it is going to be AJ Brown.
Okay, and who's going to be a breakout star?
And breakout star, before you bring it up, throw it back at me, Dan. I think I might have picked this guy for crush it last year, but I'm going to say I'm going to call him breakout this year, and I'm going to say Dallas Goedert. And again, it's just based on the assumption that the offense is going to be so much better this year, and there's going to be a whole playbook opened up, and we're going to have so many options. And I think that we'll hopefully now see the best of him, because I really was expecting big things for him last year in the receiving game, and obviously he got hurt, so we can kind of give him the benefit of the doubt based on that. So I'm going to say Goddard's breaking out this year.
Perfect. Can I just add in, Dan? Like I would have thought, like with the acquisitions, what you brought with the defense, obviously with the downfall with the cornerbacks last year, I would have thought like Cooper DeJohn would have been a good standout for a breakout. I would have thought.
Yeah, obviously we're looking for vast improvement there, because last year, third down conversion against us was awful. There was big gaps in the centre as well, so safety was a problem last year as well. But as I said, I'm thinking the offense with the weapons that we've got underperformed so much last year, and I was expecting big things for Goddard last year. So that's what I'm looking for this year.
Paul, just to bring you back for a second. Sorry, Gav, I'll come back in a second. Just on the talk of the Eagles' offense, just a quick brief on this, Paul. What can Kev expect to see from a Kellen Moore offense with someone like Jalen Hurts at quarterback?
You're going to get a vast majority of different reads. Obviously, different wide receivers are going to get distributed out a bit more openly. It's not going to be purely just AJ Brown or who's your other number? Sorry,
Devontae.
Devontae Smith. Yep, yeah, that's the one. So it's not just going to be those two guys. It's going to be a vast majority of guys that could be like in rotation is going to be given opportunities. So that's one thing that always needs to be considered with Kellen Moore. He's quite open in regards to that.
Sorry, Gav, what were you going to say?
No, just because, a couple of reflections on the Eagles for this year. So first of all, Kev, forget trying to get to Philly, get to Brazil. That's where you want to be for your
I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, because that's no joke. Like, when you think about it, with the time zone difference, then you're flying back. Because remember what happened with the Seahawks when they went to Germany, especially coming all the way from Seattle. That's a much longer journey than coming from the East Coast. So the jet lag's going to take a massive effect for the next preparation for week 2.
Yeah, it's a big hit early on, because obviously historically with the international games, they tend to put it around the bye week. I know they've tinkered with not always doing that, but usually they kind of give a bit of recovery. But yeah, like you say, Paul, week 1, and then you've got to do that flight both ways and get on with your season. It is a bit of a hit there. But I think the other question I'd maybe have, Kev, just in terms of how things went last season. So obviously the Eagles did well. If you look at the record, they didn't get back to the Super Bowl, but they made the playoffs. But what worries me looking at that is that 1-5 finish in the regular season, 1-6 if you count the slaughter against the Bucks. So just, I guess, in terms of momentum, how do you feel that carries into this season? How can you kind of stop that slide?
Well, as I said, I think the biggest thing is that the players didn't suddenly get bad the last 6-7 weeks of the season. We've got good players. I think the problem is that the coaching and the play calling wasn't good enough. I think that I said it time and time again when we were winning games, that when we had an excellent record, that we were just doing enough, and sooner or later that's going to catch up with you. You can't keep just like bailing your offense, bailing your defense out, your defense bailing your offense out. Sooner or later, it's going to catch up with you. And I think there was just it was going stale. There was just no fresh ideas, and I think that's why I'm so much looking forward to game one, because we want to see something totally new. We want to see loads of play action. We want to see like as I said, the playbook getting opened right up. And I think that's the only way that we can snap out of that, is just by ripping it up and starting again almost.
And I think just in terms of balance, I mean, I think we could say probably all of our teams are a wee bit enigmatic. But I mean, I mentioned that 1-5 slide that the Eagles had at the end, but the two games right before that, wins against the Bills, wins against the Chiefs.
Yeah.
So, I as you say, there is a good team there. That game against the Bills was one of the games of the season, actually. So, yeah, the potential's there. But I think, I guess, like the rest of us, we're probably just wondering what kind of team are we going to see? Is it maybe that team early on, or the home straight?
It just totally depends on how the defense adapt to Fangio's schemes, and also the offense, Kellen Moore's. But I think Fangio, he was consulting with the Eagles when we built this defense. So that's another thing that excites me. I'm hoping that it's a good fit, because he had a hand in putting this defense together. So it should go well.
Excellent, Kev. Thank you very much. Just to quantify, after the Brazil game, the Eagles' next game isn't for 10 days. So that might get a bit of a break. They play Green Bay in the 6th of September, and the next game is not at home to Atlanta on the 16th. So they've got 10 days between games. So the potential, obviously, the league have obviously looked at. Assuming they'll go from Friday night to Monday Night Football by the looks of it. So that'll give them a good break by the looks of it. All right, guys.
That makes sense, yeah.
It's becoming the exciting bit of this podcast. The things I've been waiting for all night. What I'll do is tell you, no fighting, please. No fighting. And we can't all win the division like one of the other podcasts predicted. So let's one couple of things to quantify. So we're going to get your predictions next for your team. We can fire into each other and argue, disagree with each other as it goes along. One thing we'll say is that the NFC East this season are up against the NFC North, which is probably the toughest division in football this year, apart from the Browns. Sorry. We'll be fighting against the Browns, but the other three teams will make it a tough game for us. So, and we're also up against the AFC South as well, which isn't exactly the strongest division. So we're basically up against probably the toughest division in football, and potentially the softest division in football. So let's get the predictions for the season. Kev, you rounded us off there with your team. So tell us what the Eagles going to finish on this season.
I've had a good look at the fixtures. I've run through them, and I reckon we'll be 11-6 this year.
11-6. All right. Paul?
Best case scenario, 11-6. Worst case scenario, 8 and 9. That's the worst case.
I'm going to ask you to explain that 8 and 9.
Well, it's purely based on the divisional games, because obviously the Commanders, they're going to be improved obviously under Dan Quinn. I think it's not going to be a pushover. We've got a more dynamic offense when it comes to the Giants with neighbours in there, so that's something to need to be considered. And with obviously we're going up against the Eagles with Kellen Moore, so it's going to be more toss-up games, if I'm being honest.
Yeah,
that's the reason why I'm kind of saying that's the worst case scenario. But best case scenario, I would say 11-6.
Yeah, there's a lot of games for us this season. You look at the schedule that could go either way. Games against the Lions, the 49ers, Houston. Those games they could go either way. It's a tough schedule we've got, to be fair.
I'm not gonna lie. 49ers, I'm already counting that as a loss if I'm being perfectly honest.
Yeah,
it's away from home again. So I think that's 2 years in the trot now. We've been away to Levi Stadium.
Santa Clara, yeah. All right, Aled, exciting season ahead for you. All fresh beginnings for the team. New quarterback, new head coach.
Yeah.
Where he's going to sit come the end of the season?
Well, I think 4 wins last season, that's a one-off, hopefully. Get back to more baseline of the last couple of years, which is 6, 7, maybe 8 wins. My head says 7 wins. My heart says I'm going to go for one more 8 and 9. So, I haven't come on yet. And as the Welshman, I'm going to win every game. I think be realistic. But then, what's great about this is, like they say, any given Sunday, you don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't know either way, but I got to give a prediction, so I'm gonna say 8 and 9.
Right, and Gav, he's going to improve on 6 and 11 last season.
So I'm going to say yes. Is the short answer to that. The longer one, I mean, it depends who you ask. I mean, Chat GPT is very cagey. If you ask that, I think they'll give you anything between 10 and 7 and 7 and 10. But I think, Vegas, they're actually saying the over-under for the Giants is 6.5 wins this year. Obviously, we saw in the AFC's podcast earlier in the week, there was some major swings for the fences. I'm not going to go that way this year. I did last year. I'm thinking with Aled, I think that the Giants, well-coached team, were probably floating about the 500 mark in this. I think probably going to be in the hunt late in the season, but I think probably just missing out. So if you want to push me, I'm going to go 8 and 9. I'd like to say 9 and 8, but I think probably 8 and 9. We've talked about the common opponents that we've got. The Giants were 500 in division games last year. Our strength of schedule opponents, we've got to go to Seattle, which it is a tricky trip. I said that was the key game for the season. Vikings, possibly, actually, with the McCarthy injury, we've got an injury there, but still a tough team. And the other one is the Colts. That's a team that actually Richardson went down last year. I don't think we know what we've really got in them. That could be a tricky one. So, yeah, Dayball is going to get the most out of this team. I've got every confidence in him. I think I'm going to go 8 and 9.
Okay, just to throw the cat amongst the pigeons, guys. Right, I'm now going to come to you and tell me what you think the other teams are going to finish at, just to see what you think. All right. So, Kev, give me a 1-4 on the records for the division come the end of the season.
Oh, that's tricky. I don't want to upset anybody here, guys.
We're all here to upset each other.
So I'm going to say 1 is us, the Eagles, and then I'm going to move on to the Cowboys at 2, and say 10 and 7 for them. 3, gonna go for Giants. Just, but I'll say 7 and 10 Giants, and 6 and 11 Commanders.
Paul, what's your thoughts?
I think this could actually be potentially, if every team plays their cards right, this could be an NFC beast season. If I'm being perfectly honest, like there is a lot of good pauses for each individual team, but I'll obviously being fair with this, I still think we could still win the division. It is between us and the Eagles. I think it will probably come down to the last game of the season, which always seems to be when Philly and Dallas always play either week 16 or week 17 just to really determine who's going to win it, essentially. I think the Commanders are going to drastically improve in terms of their record, and same with the Giants. But again, I don't know what the toss-up would be. I think it really just depends on head-to-head against you guys, I think. So it's hard to say.
Just pick one.
I think I'll go with Commanders going third. But sorry, Gav. Purely because of when I'm thinking about it, the acquisitions that Dan Quinn's brought in, he's brought in like a Bobby Wagner, a guy he's worked with extensively back in Seattle. He's going to help these other defensive players, kind of similar to what Mike Zimmer's done with Eric Kendricks, like to gain these guys. Is like, this is what Coach Dan Quinn wants us to do, like try and simplify from a player's perspective. So I think that will definitely help their their defense. In terms of their offense, like Terry McLaurin has actually finally got a pocket quarterback that hopefully, like from yours, Alan, is you can have that longevity and not like an RG3 for the years to come type of thing. So, and in terms of the Giants, and this is no disrespect to Daniel Jones, it's if he can stay healthy as well.
Yep.
That's one thing I think we haven't really talked about much. It's like, because he does take on those big hits. I love Daniel Jones's commitment, but at what cost? Like, because that could prevent him shortening his career a little bit, because you had Danny DeVito coming in, etc. So Danny, what's his name?
Tommy
DeVito. Sorry,
I played quarterback in the NFL. As long as you know what it is, you'd him as a quarterback, he's just have Arnold Schwarzenegger as his tight end, and he'd be fine.
Come on, for the ball to me, come on.
Alan, give us your 1 to 4.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at the screen, isn't it? Cowboys, Philly, it's like a toss of a coin, and then Commanders, Giants is toss of a coin, isn't it? It's the 1, 2, and then 3 and 4. So I think just looking at it, I'd probably go for Eagles 1, Dallas 2, us 3, Giants 4. But then not much in it, like the boys said, like one game in it. But like I went to watch New York Giants at MetLife last season, and I think we went in as just 3 points favourites, and then so I was fairly confident, and then obviously Giants won, and yeah, what can you say? But I'm just for the argument of this podcast, I'm going to go for us 3 and Giants to prop up the table for.
Right, Gav, give us your 1 to 4.
So, as much as it sickens me, and it does sicken me, I'm going to say the Cowboys are winning the division. I still think they'll be one and done in the playoffs, because Cowboys going to Cowboy. But I do think I just think that there's enough there to get them through the division. I think Philly. I agree with everyone else has said it's going to be competitive, but that finish last year with the players that they had is just a little bit alarming. I think still there is kind of a 2-tier aspect to this division. So I think Eagles will come second to the Cowboys and absolutely be in the hunt for the playoffs. Alid, I'm going to be sorry. I think that you're absolutely right to be optimistic in terms of the new ownership at the Commanders, but you've been even when you've won the odd division, you've been the kicking team of this division for so long. Yeah. I'm going to milk it for one more year and say Giants will finish third. I do think the Commanders will finish an improved fourth. Obviously, when you said 4 wins, I think 7 or 8 wins. I do think it's doable. I do think if we are putting up against the Giants, they have, despite all their struggles, they did sweep that series last year. And as I say, I think Dayball is going to be a competitive coach that we're not going to. I don't think we're ever going to have a tanking season as long as he's the head coach. But I think that. Yeah, I'm going to enjoy it while it lasts, because I do think there is a new culture in Washington. You talked about how you can't buy success. The previous ownership tried to do that. And you'll probably remember Alfred Hainsworth.
Albert Hainsworth,
that $100 million contract that get written off.
Yeah.
You're not going to see that kind of stuff anymore. So I think Paul's talking about NFC Beast. I don't know if we're going to be quite there yet, just because I don't think we're going to see 3 teams.
It's potentially there,
Yeah,
because when you think about it, the NFC South, it'll probably just be Tampa Bay again, and the rest of that their rosters still kind of scrapping up. They're at the same position for the past couple of years, so that's what I'm kind of thinking with that. And
Yeah, I think as a division, I think it is going to be competitive this year. I probably would say I'm not seeing anyone doing particularly well in the postseason from this cohort, but I do think it is going to be competitive this year, and definitely want to look forward to.
Do you know what? I think that there's potential upside for all four teams, like a lot of potential upside for all four teams. I think maybe less so for the Cowboys than the other three. I think the Cowboys will kind of just be, kind of similar to how they've been the last couple of years. But I think the way we finished, there's huge upside potential, and the other, you guys are both building and you are both making progress, so it should be interesting.
I think you're right though, Kev, because when you think about it after next season, like if that Prescott doesn't sign that contract, we've got 2 years of dead cap space to fund over, so we've got less of a salary cap to play about with. Trey Lance right now is not really elevating himself up to be a QB number 2 at this moment. Cooper Rush is still QB number 2 right now, and I'm sorry I'm going to say it, but Trey Lance is still playing like as if he's a rookie. He's not really played much football in college, even when he was at San Francisco and getting beat out by Brock Purdy. And fair play to Brock Purdy, he's been fantastic for them and stuff like that. But for drafting a 4th round draft pick, you would expect better things to kind of really solidify himself as a backup, and potentially maybe if Daxdale doesn't go through, he would have been the star. So I do have concerns for that in terms of beyond next season.
Okay, guys, we've been too friendly and too cordial. I didn't like that. Hey guys, that's been a great discussion. I've really enjoyed talking about it. It actually was good for me just to sit back and try and be as neutral as possible, listen to you guys talking about it.
You didn't do very well.
Can I give my friend a shout out? Is that right? I think he's watching tonight, Chris. He always comes to Wembley or London, one of the games with me every year. And F1 is his sport, but fair play. He enjoys the spectacle and he picks the team that we go and see. One of the teams buys a cap and a jersey and gets into it. And that's what's brilliant about this game now. We've got us guys who are really invested in it. You've got other people who just love, the spectacle. So, it's massive in the UK when you see things like that, So, hello, Chris. Thanks for watching.
No, thanks for doing this.
Dan, I've actually got a wee question for you guys. Like, I know we've talked about our division, but and talking about we are being all more positive in terms of we're getting better and stuff like that. But who do you think is actually going to be the potential winner of the NFC?
Oh, guys, we're going to have to save that for another pod.
Right, I'll save it for Astro then.
Don't you worry. We will come to that. Don't you worry yourself. Right. Guys, thanks for your time tonight. It's been absolutely great talking to you about how the season is going to pan out for our teams. Everybody that's been watching and listening to us tonight, again, thank you as always for joining into the crew. This podcast is obviously live at the moment. It will go on your Spotify, your Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you can find your podcasts over the next day or so. Guys, Paul, thanks for joining in. I think that's your third appearance, Paul. You do a hat trick ball now?
This is my hat trick now, yes.
Yes, a hat trick ball coming your way. A golden hat trick ball for Paul. Kev, good to have you back.
Thanks, Dan. Great to be back, mate.
Gav, I think I've seen more of you than I've seen of my wife over the last couple of weeks. Good to see you again.
It's always a pleasure, Dan. And my apologies to Leslie. I'll give a Tommy DeVito sign off.
And Al, great to have you on. Love to have you back on throughout the season, talking about all things Commanders and see how things pan out for you.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. This is my third podcast appearance, not with you. My first 2 was over in the 1 Point Safety Show with Scott Hartley and Scouse Andy. So thanks for giving me my third opportunity, Dan. Really appreciate you reaching out.
No problem. And we'll sure we'll have you back on as the season goes on.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for tuning in, and until the season kicks off and we've got a preview cruise coming throughout the rest of the off season. Until then, the crew will see you through.